Hi, I'm Carter Clews. Welcome to Inside Judicial Watch. I'm very pleased today to have with us the Director of Investigations for Judicial Watch, a gentleman who has, I have here 160 pages of Judicial Watch lawsuits. Almost all of them originate with this gentleman's department. Chris Farrell, welcome to Inside Judicial Watch.
Thank you, Carter. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And we're going to talk about a variety of topics. Before I do, just so you'll know, and some of you who I know frequent Judicial Watch website and are familiar with Chris, especially his program on Watch, are also familiar with his background. But I just want to read it to you because this is a gentleman who, when it comes to investigations, not only talks the talk, but he has walked the walk. And let me, if I may, not to embarrass you, but let me read a little bit of this background here, because I think our viewers will appreciate this as much as I do. Chris graduated distinguished military graduate from Fordham, whereupon he accepted a regular Army commission and served as a military intelligence officer specializing in counterintelligence and human intelligence. He's a graduate of the Military Intelligence Officers Basic and Advanced Courses, U.S. Army Advanced Counterintelligence Training Course, the Combined Armed Services Staff School of U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, the Defense Intelligence Agency's Military Operations and Training Corps, and an organization who I can't even pronounce the name of it.
So it's German, yeah.
Because it's German. But that is the, Chris, what?
Haus Rissen Institut for Politik und Wirtschaft. Politics and economics, that's all.
In Hamburg, Germany. So I won't even try that myself here. And he had 3 tours of duty in the Federal Republic of Germany, which is West Germany, right? What we used to call West Germany.
I was fortunate enough to be in West Germany and then in Germany. And the old joke that the French like Germany so much that they actually would prefer to have 2 of them again. No, but I was there for the height of the Cold War, and then the wall coming down, and then the reunification. So I got to see the full spectrum.
Yeah. And it was during that time that you were instrumental in apprehending some people who were not very nice guys. I think spies would be the correct term. Is that right?
Yep. I guess my last 5 or 6 years in Germany, I was there for about 8 years. We were very fortunate. I ran counterespionage investigations in Heidelberg, where I commanded the counterintelligence detachment that was in support to headquarters U.S. Army Europe in Heidelberg. And in that time frame, myself and the agents that were working for me on this counterespionage effort, we rolled up 6 bad guys, 6 foreign intelligence agents. And when I say rolled up, I mean in the case of one guy, a guy named by the name of Burkhard Kruppe, who was an East German who had been recruited by the MFS, had worked for the East Germans, but then as the wall came down, or as East Germany was going through its sort of velvet revolution, the East German intelligence service handed him off to the Soviets. And it's interesting because they didn't hand him off to the KGB, which is the political intelligence service. They handed him off to the GRU, which was the Soviet military intelligence service. And the thinking behind that was, no matter what happened with the Warsaw Pact and reunification of Germany, no matter what happened even in the Soviet Union, the GRU, the intelligence service for the military, would always have its mission. The KGB might come or go because of the political environment within the Soviet Union, which would then become Russia.
Right.
But the military wasn't going anywhere. And so they handed off this asset, this guy, Burkhard Kruppe, who was spying against headquarters U.S. Army Europe. The East Germans knew where the future was, and they decided no matter what the political state of affairs were, the Russian military would always be there, right? Always defending Mother Russia.
Right.
And so they handed him off to the military service. And then, very fortunately, we had a very successful operation back against him. And then jointly with the Germans arrested him. He was tried, convicted, sentenced to jail. And now he's out. He's running around in Berlin.
So now he's a free
Interestingly.
man, but he
He
served
is.
his time and
He
he was
did.
a spy.
That is correct.
And you helped bring him in. And I think it's very key that the Soviet Union, it was the Soviet Union at that point,
At that
right?
point, yeah.
And Russia, subsequently Russia was involved, because one of the items that I would like to talk with you about, because I personally think, and we'll see what happens as it unfolds, but I think this could become a major, major scandal, probably should have been already, and that's the entire situation involving uranium. Russia's involvement in getting hold of 20% of America's uranium.
Yep.
And frankly, the Clintons' involvement in it. So let's go back in time to when Judicial Watch first really broke the story about the Clintons' involvement with the uranium, with Russian.
2015.
2015.
We were way ahead of the story.
Yeah.
We were litigating this as far back as 2015 because our folks, we have some wonderful investigators and researchers here, and they were watching and kind of tracking what the Clinton Foundation was up to, and in particular, of course, Bill and Hillary personally, because so much of all their sort of criminal mischief really is driven by them personally. Yeah. These are not underlings running around doing stuff. It's actually them leveraging their former position or in some cases, their active position when Hillary was Secretary of State. They always monetize or leverage their official government position for personal gain. It's their MO. It's how they operate.
Personal gain.
It's how they operate.
We're talking hundreds of millions of
That is true. Here. Yeah. So going back to 2015, our folks were looking at this and saying, this is an odd set of circumstances. And so we had filed various open records requests looking at the transaction itself.
Now we're talking about the transaction. Let's go back to the background of Uranium One getting the 20%. Let's explain what happened.
Right. So there's sort of a little bit of a shell game involved. And so you had Bill Clinton involved with a guy named Frank Giustra, who was a Canadian in the energy business. And they were looking at uranium mines and uranium holdings in Kazakhstan. And so there's an effort on the part of the Canadian Giustra to get involved with or have a controlling interest in these Kazakhstani mines,
uranium mines,
and the leverage to get in or to come to the attention of the guy who is president for life or dictator or whatever his title is in Kazakhstan was to use Bill Clinton because he's an instant door opener, right? Because a lot of these guys, they want the recognition or the acknowledgement that Clinton came and visited them.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a trophy.
I just have to interject here.
Yeah, sure.
It's almost, you almost can't keep a straight face when you say it, but this gentleman's name is, the president of Kazakhstan at the time was named Nazar, you'll be able to correct me on the pronunciation, Nazarbayev, something. Yeah. This man had been a dictator at this point, 2005, for 19 years.
Yeah, he's a recycled communist. I mean, they changed his business card and he went right back to work. Right? There's no change, no real material change from Soviet Union days. So instead of being the Soviet Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan, it became the Republic of Kazakhstan.
Right.
And he went to lunch and came back and became president. I mean, I don't mean to sound glib, but it's that bad.
It's just that bad. So he is the dictator, and a pretty ruthless dictator.
Absolutely.
But he wants to be the head of an international organization that does what?
That manages and certifies all the uranium and nuke facilities around the country.
Right.
Around the world.
And internationally also oversees elections and supports democracy.
Absolutely.
He wants that. That's what he wants.
I'm sure he's a wonderful advocate of democracy in other places.
So
not where he is, but other places.
Well, so who does he bring over? Bill Clinton.
Yeah, Mr. Democracy, right?
In the plane owned by
Frank Giustra.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
And so there's this, Bill Clinton gives a 20-minute speech and pulls down $500,000 for it. That's not an exaggeration. But he was a door opener, right? He facilitated this relationship. He had Giustra meeting with the Kazakhstani folks, and not everything is done by the El Presidente of Kazakhstan. It's done by other ministerial folks. So he kind of greases the skids. He lets it all happen. And in return for that, besides the $500,000 20-minute speech, when Clinton gets back to the United States, then mysteriously monies appear in Clinton Foundation coffers via the Canadian. They use them as a cutout, essentially, right?
Essentially.
That's how they work.
3.1. Giastra gets the rights to the Kazakh uranium mines.
Yep.
He comes back and gives $3.1 million to the Clinton Foundation.
But that's just a fraction, because the overall take was like $143 million.
Exactly.
Right.
Because then Giastra sells. Now we're coming up to where Uranium One comes in, the company. He sells his company to Uranium One, which is essentially Russian control. Correct? So he sells it and makes, I think, $3 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And that the president then, the chairman of Uranium One, then gives another $2.54 million to the Clinton Foundation, and their board members and executives give another $140 million to the Clinton Foundation.
Correct.
Now, where does a gentleman named Robert Mueller, the chief investigator in America right now, where does he fit into all this?
Well, if you catapult back in time when all this stuff was going on, because you're talking about U.S. not just financial interests, but also mineral rights interests, right? The ownership of these, I was going to say commodities, not really commodities in the sense of sugar and coffee, but these mineral rights.
Uranium. Yeah.
There's something called CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And it's a 13-member panel composed of all the different agencies that you would think of. So state, commerce, defense, all these different agencies have representatives there. And they're supposed to review who's buying what, right? Because there are essential U.S. financial interests and resources that, while we don't mind foreign investment, it's a good thing, right? Yeah. What we don't want to do is lose control of our own national assets, right?
Particularly uranium, which is used in the development of atomic weapons.
Exactly. So in this case, CFIUS is supposed to review this transaction and make sure that it's in the United States' interest, that it's not harmful to us, identify, well, who is giving the money and who's calling the shots, because that all matters, right? I mean,
right.
And so it's an interesting cast of characters because Mueller's involved in it. Rod Rosenstein, the current Deputy Attorney General, is involved in it.
Who appointed Mueller to be the chief inquisitor of Trump.
Correct. And so all these folks had knowledge of this very bizarre deal that was leveraged by the Clintons with this Canadian cutout and all the money coming in. It just smelled bad, right?
Right.
And so, they have knowledge of all this. No referral is made with respect to a law enforcement review of it. There's reason to believe that other persons involved in this entire transaction were dirty. This is not a bunch of Boy Scouts doing this. I mean, just look at the Kazakhstan leadership, right?
Yes.
There's a problem. And so, if you then come forward now, you say, well, how did all this happen? And why didn't anybody say anything? And where were the notifications? And the story, cut to the chase, Mueller, Rosenstein, and others, who all had knowledge of this, sat on it.
They sat on it.
For years.
They did not tell what was the name of the organization that was reviewing it?
CFIUS. Yeah.
CFIUS.
The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States.
They did not tell CFIUS that they were investigating Russian involvement in trying to get our uranium, while CFIUS was conducting an approval process to give the uranium to the Russians.
And the FBI was looking at this from their own perspective, and there's been some excellent reporting by Sarah Carter, who's a wonderful reporter that we've had dealings with.
Great reporter.
And she's been on television a lot recently, kind of unwinding the story, explaining, because there was a recruited source, right? There was a confidential informant on the inside of the Russian transaction, or the Russian side of the deal, let's put it that way, who was providing all sorts of information about who was involved and how much money and all this sort of nitty-gritty stuff that a lot of folks don't pay attention to, and I wouldn't expect them to, frankly, because it is a very complex, kind of inside deal. But that whistleblower, that that confidential informant who has all this information, who's been trying to tell the truth about this, is now represented by, I think it's Victoria Tensing. And so this person's come forward and said, hey, wait a minute, I was in on all this and watching all of it, and I told everybody what was happening. And this is the last thing these people want to hear, right? The last thing they want is somebody stepping up saying, excuse me, I was on the inside, and I told all these folks what was going on, and no one did anything.
They didn't do anything. So Robert Mueller, Rosenstein, right, Holder, I believe, as well, they all knew that Russia was trying to grab hold of our uranium, which they then could sell to people like Iran and other client states.
Or just control it, because it was just control. I mean, there's reporting in the last day or so that says that they weren't just looking for 20%, that their real strategic objective was market dominance, right? They wanted to control as much as they possibly could, which really obviously put a squeeze on us. It's kind of like China with respect to rare earth minerals. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but there are these certain minerals that are, just like they say, they're not common, not easily found. We need them for all sorts of technology, like radars and jet aircraft and stuff. And so they're a very specialized, particularized mineral set that is not found everywhere. The Chinese have an abundance of this, and we're sort of semi-held hostage to the Chinese to get these resources. And this is a parallel to what Russia was looking at. They may not have been able to corner the market or control uranium around the world, but they would have been such a pivotal key player. They may not have been able to control it, but they certainly could have sort of swayed or influenced the market. And there's only so much uranium going around.
So what we have, just to sum this up, Hillary Clinton sat on the committee that approved the sale of 20% of our uranium to Russia at a time when Robert Mueller and his cohorts were keeping information from that committee that Russia was being investigated in an attempt to take over, and the Clinton Foundation, in turn, got several $100 million in donations. It's very
let me knock down an argument that some viewers who are skeptical will say, well, wait a minute, how could this be? Because I've heard the argument from Hillary, where she says, well, I was just one of 13 members of this committee, and if you think that I could force 12 other people to, they can.
Yeah, she could.
Yeah. So let's just dismiss.
It only took one vote on that committee to block it.
Let's just dismiss this. Oh gee, it's just a little old me routine, right?
Yeah.
All those persons know the people that were involved, the stakes that were involved, the amount of pressure that was brought to bear, and so. Trying to diffuse or trying to, sort of muddy the water by saying, well, I couldn't possibly have controlled all these other people. That's really quite disingenuous. I think all the persons involved knew the weight and the enormity of the question that they were facing. And there was pressure applied, I'm quite certain.
And they made the decision to give the uranium to Russia, by the way, in 50 days in a decision-making process that was supposed to require 75.
Yeah, so you have to ask yourself, what's the race and who approved the waiver to speed it up, and what was the argument made for this sort of compelling need to advance the ball at a faster rate than was normal? Because all these steps, all these procedures have a regular routine to them. And if you vary from the regular process or procedure, it's virtually guaranteed that you have to have some sort of an explanation or justification or waiver. You just can't do it because you feel like it, right?
Precisely.
So,
as you pointed out when we started this conversation, in December of 2015, Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit seeking all communications, Freedom of Information lawsuit, seeking access to documents involving the uranium deal that we're discussing right now.
That is correct. We were way ahead of the
game.
Yeah.
Way ahead of the game. If ever there was an example of the swamp, this is certainly it. But before we close, and we are running out of time.
We can do a double episode.
We can do a double episode, but let me squeeze in real quickly. Give us your overview right now and if you don't mind, since it's very near the new year, your prediction
Oh.
on where we are with the Comey. We have 3 lawsuits. Judicial Watch has 3 lawsuits on the Comey memos.
Yep.
Give us a little update on that, and where do you think we're going with it?
So, it's wildly offensive to me that Comey sat in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee and under oath admitted that he absconded with government records and selectively leaked information through another member of the bar, a cutout friend of his at Columbia, to give stuff to the New York Times. And stuff that was particularly related to his interactions with the chief executive of the United States. When he got done testifying about that, frankly, he should have been Mirandized and taken out of the room in cuffs. That's my interpretation of life. Instead, these, and I'm going to be pejorative, I'm going to be kind of negative here, these moron senators, and they're both sides, right?
Yeah.
You have somebody like Warner, who's busy trying to get his 2020 campaign ginned up, and then you have somebody like Burr out of North Carolina, who's basically asleep at the switch. These 2 guys and others are all busy thanking Comey.
Thanking him.
He just had and it wasn't even a spontaneous utterance. He just sat there and knowingly, willingly admitted under oath that he committed a crime.
Released classified information.
Absolutely, and he absconded with federal government records, right, that were composed by him, a federal employee, on federal time, on a federal computer. I mean, there's no way in the world anybody can say that those memos were not U.S. government records. So he says all this under oath in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and they all say, "Oh, you're a wonderful human being and a great American," and they're, clapping like seals. It's beyond imagination. I mean, arguably they should have called the Senate Sergeant at Arms and placed him under arrest, and they could have, but they're out to lunch. They don't realize they have admissions under oath in front of them, and they don't realize that a crime's been committed.
In one of our lawsuits, we got a response to it, and this just stunned me. On page 3 of the response from the Department of Justice, I believe, they say that the material, they can't give Judicial Watch the material, Comey's notes, because they're classified. On page 5, they say we can't give them to you because we don't have anything to do with them. They're his private property.
Yeah, and
which is it?
Yeah, they don't know. That's part of the problem. And the other thing that's wildly infuriating is you've got Attorney General Sessions and the rest of the Department of Justice really kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth at once. And I think that the Attorney General Sessions is a very fine man, and I think his heart's in the right place. But I don't think he appreciates that he has civil litigators working for him that are arguing against his interests as Attorney General and arguing against the interests and the specific directive of the President of the United States. I've said before, you'll recall the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, right? Her shenanigans. She violated her oath, really should be disbarred for what she did. But there's an army of Sally Yateses working underneath Attorney General Sessions. And so while he takes a position that's consistent with the President with respect to their goals and objectives and what they want to do and make records public and really sort of expose the criminality of the Clintons, it's a criminal enterprise, the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
Simultaneously, they have attorneys out of the civil division arguing against the stated objectives of the administration. It's, we're at the appellate level with some of this stuff. And, going to a U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit and having attorneys show up who have filed briefs and made representations in court that we know are 180 degrees opposite of what the administration has claimed, I don't know how you reconcile that. I don't know how you explain it.
So we go to court, we fight to get the information, and they argue against their own president.
Correct.
And ostensibly against their own boss, the Attorney General.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you the question. I'm sure everybody else out here is wondering the same thing. Why didn't Trump get rid of the guy?
Yeah, here's the problem. I mean, and it's not just the Department of Justice. In large part it is, but you can go across the government and find this. There are what are referred to as Schedule C appointees. They're presidential appointees. They're political, and it's not, I don't say that negatively. The president can pick who he wants.
Right.
That goes back to Andrew Jackson and the spoils system. I mean, it's a long tradition. And so the president gets to pick his team, his guys or his women that he wants to have in these positions. Often people think Schedule C and they go, oh, you mean secretaries? Yeah, that is true, but there's a whole bunch of folks who do not require senatorial confirmation. So like very senior attorneys and policy advisors and analysts and guys who are going to shape policy and move the agenda along.
Or not move the agenda.
Well, that's the problem, because what happens is Obama's Schedule C people are still occupying their posts in departments and agencies across the government. And they've been kept on or held over by the Trump administration. And in many cases, there are senior political appointees who are turning to these Obama people and saying, well, you've been here a while. Tell me how this works.
Wow.
I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to do anything good.
Yep.
So kind of walk and talk me through this. And they are. But you have to think, and I'm not saying that they're all doing something horrible or traitorous, but they're doing it through the lenses of the Obama administration.
Right.
They're philosophically 180 degrees out from what the president wants. So they're not bad or dishonest people. They're just carrying out their job the way that they were appointed to do it. And now you have senior Trump appointees relying on these people, many of whom have actually converted their positions from presidential appointees even to become straight-up civil servants, right?
So you can't get rid of them.
It's very, very tough. And I've suggested that all the Obama Schedule C people who are currently still occupying posts all through the government, it's Justice, Commerce, Labor,
right across the
State
board.
Department,
EPA,
HUD, all of them, they really need to resign and be gone effective 1 December. And then bring people that the president, it's his right to install them. There's nothing illegal or weird about it. You just say, thank you for your service. You're done. It's time for new administration. But we're months into this game. I mean, we're now a year, really, since the election. And 10 months from the president being sworn in. So that is a huge, huge problem. And I know people within the government who are political appointees who have described this to me and said, it makes life very tough because we're not just trying to do our job against the federal government that really doesn't particularly like us and kind of sabotages what we're doing, but even the people that are supposedly on our side aren't.
So what's the hope for change?
It's actually
final prediction.
Final prediction. The hope for change is actually quite strong, but it's going to require some very difficult decisions and some very strong leadership. If it doesn't work, it's a leadership failure, and you can only hang it around the neck, unfortunately, of the president and of his cabinet secretaries. All of these issues, if they don't resolve themselves well, it's always a leadership failure. Always.
And I don't know whether that was a happy prediction or a foreboding prediction, but it's a realistic prediction.
It's a we'll see prediction.
It's a we'll see prediction. Thank you.
Thank you
very much for joining us, Chris. Thank you for joining us, and happy Thanksgiving.